Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the cert-manager bi-weekly meeting. It's the 27th of July, 2022. It's 5 o'clock London time. We've got a bunch of people today, the usual JetStack crew. We've got Jake, who is no longer in the usual JetStack crew, but is still in the cert-manager crew, and a few others, including Zhangzhe, who's our Google Summer of Code student. The agenda today has got a few cool items on it, and Zhangzhe, you were the first on the list, so would you like to present first?
Yeah, I'm here. I should share my screen.
Please feel free, yeah.
Okay. Could you view it?
We can see that. It's clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to introduce my first step work of GSOC. Firstly, let's look at this repository. The repository named testing add-ons. The goal is to save time when testing the manager working with external dependencies. Before we use this tool, we need to install kubectl, Helm, Terraform, and Terraground. And the Terraground is a theme wrapper that provides extra tools for keeping your configuration. Don't repeat yourself. Working with multiple Terraform modules and manage remote state. We can also configure Terraform plug cache to improve the execution speed, because we need to use multiple providers. The simplest usage steps is below. And take Vault as an example. Firstly, go to the installation directory, and then execute terraground run or init to init all providers of or modules. Then execute terraground run or apply to destroy to deploy the cert-manager and the Vault by default configuration. And finally, we can destroy test environmental by terraground run or and destroy. Let's go to my terminal. I will demonstrate it. Firstly, set the factory. We can use terraground or init to init providers of all modules. Okay, then we can run terraground run or fine. We can, yes. Because it needs some time, so we can, so I can introduce more detail. By the way, imagine our goals of deploy and set of the manager and board is to deploy and configure the manager headcode board and a the manager board cluster issue to an existing Kubernetes cluster. Board will be deployed in the in security dev model mode with PKI security engine configured for issue certs for the manage.io subdomains by default. A class issue named board issue will be created and then issue certs from this PKI using board's dev root token. And now we also use Apple rule, and I will introduce it later. A certificate named demo app board cert will be created that issued by board issue. We can look at this dependency group. We can use home provider to install the manager and the board at the same time, and then we can use board provider to configure board. Finally, to use Kubernetes provider to configure the manager. It will create a class issue and a certificate. And this is detailed usage steps. Firstly, execute terraform run or init to init providers of all modules. And most important, we can also configure custom variable. We can configure kubeconfig path, the manager and the void version, and the root domain of the board PKI, and the default is the manage.io. And we also select the authentication mechanism of board and to be used by class issue or issue. And default is app rule. The other selection is token. And finally, we can run and terraform run or apply to deploy all modules, and terraform run or destroy to clean test environment. And let's go back terminal. The deployment has been finished. We can check the status. And the cert-manager and the board has been deployed and set up. We can check class issues and is ready, and check the certificate. That's also ready. And that is all my demonstration. If you have any question, welcome to open the issues in this repository. I will look it. Thank you.
Thank you. That looks really great. You've been working closely with Erber on this, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I will stop sharing.
Yeah, Zhang has done some really good work for Google Summer of Code. If anyone who joined later missed, our this year's Google Summer of Code project is to make it easier for maintainers to deploy cert-manager together with like external dependencies for like kind of purposes such as like debugging and testing. So deploying cert-manager together with Vault and like already configured Vault issuer is the first part of the work that Cheng just did. And the next bit we are looking at is to deploy cert-manager together with like a gateway controller and gateway API and the configured issuer to work with that. So that should help people for like kind of local configuration and testing, I hope.
Yeah, it looks really easy to use. It looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to giving that a go myself.
Yeah, I think it's great work. I've been really happy to mentor Jay. For example, I hadn't used something like TerraGrant before that he introduced as a way how to like specify dependency order between Terraform modules. So, and that seems to work really well. Well, you can actually get cert-manager Vault and the Vault issuer deployed with a single command. I think that's quite good.
Definitely. I might start using it for my home lab. Was there anything else that still remained on the Google Summer of Code presentation, or shall we move on? I think probably we'll move on unless someone speaks up. The next item on the agenda is from Josh. Should we relating to trust? Josh, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I can take it away. So this point was in response to a comment you put, Ashley, on a kind of draft PR that's maybe not necessarily important for the discussion. But the contents of the comment itself was about a large question to do with the trust project, about its scope in terms of what its intentions are. To speak more concretely, is trust solely interested in X509 certificate authorities, probably encoded in different formats, or is it concerned with a like a larger kind of superset than that? So maybe for context, I'm thinking more along the lines of, is it not just concerned with CAs? Is it concerned with public keys? I'm kind of almost thinking in the realm of like OIDC here. Is it concerned with other kind of publicly trustable like text files, like whatever? So I think the point is, yeah, the current state of the world, trust doesn't care, and I think you put it best, where it is effectively a kind of quote unquote more smarter Unix cat command, and it doesn't try and treat any particular source or destination differently yet. Is that what we want to do? Is it not what we want to do? Yeah, I mean, kind of start off the conversation, I'm in two minds about it. I quite like the idea of trust having a bit more scope and it not necessarily imposing any limitations on the kind of things that you can share. It indeed gives it a lot more kind of future proofing in that regard. But conversely, perhaps it makes sense to scope it in quite a limited way. Yeah, I think so. And one thing we could do in the future, for example, is just add more CRD resources to deal with different types of trust bundles. Yeah, which is also a totally valid thing as well. One thing I will say to caveat is that if we do go down the road that we want to be quite particular about what we allow for this resource type. Let's say we just want X509 root certificate authorities, let's say. It could get quite tricky from the source perspective. X509 certificates can be represented in different ways. There's PEM encoding, DARE encoding, PKCS12, all the other things under the sun, a combination of the above. And so it could, in theory, make the API from a user perspective a bit of a nightmare, and even more so from a kind of coding author's perspective. And having no opinions on the kind of data you're distributing, it makes that side of things a lot easier. Yeah, so I think I'll stop my kind of monologue there and see what other people have to think about the subject. If I've explained that well, hopefully I have. Hopefully people.
I understood it, but then I am the one that wrote the comment in the first place. So if anyone else needs more context, please shout. I can explain my thinking behind the comment for sure. I think if we so currently, as Josh said, the trust project is essentially a concatenation of different sources. It reads text from several sources and then outputs it differently. Outputs it into one file. It's the Unix cat command. What concerns me about us allowing anything and just catting it together is, one, that makes it difficult to deal with binary data, which encoded certificates are. Kubernetes usually just base64 encodes them, but that doesn't have a defined meaning for programs that are trying to parse a dir certificate. They expect binary data, and currently we just can't handle that. Like we would currently happily concatenate a PKCF12 input with a PEM encoded input, output them into the same file, and that's not a meaningful thing to do. My expectation of what Trust would do when it comes to X509 certificates is that it could accept many input formats, and I think that's tractable, right? We can do dir and PEM easily in the Go standard library. They're very simple to do. In fact, they're basically the same thing. PKCS12, JKS, others, we have libraries and we do all of those in cert-manager anyway. And as input formats, I think it's actually quite simple for us to read the main ones. And I don't think there's many more we need beyond those that I've just listed. Crucially then, I think by enumerating the types of inputs we'll accept, it makes it easy to convert any of those inputs into a standard intermediate representation, which would be PEM in practice. Like whatever we get, we will convert it into PEM and store it as PEM, and then can output it in any format that's useful to people. So what specializing here allows us to do is take certs from a variety of different input sources, be that dir, be that PKCS12, whatever, and then output them in any one output format, which is specifically what most applications want. Any application that wants to consume a certificate will usually have one format it can read, and be that JKS, be that PEM, whatever. Usually it's going to be PEM, but we don't necessarily know that. And certainly in cert-manager, we support all of these anyway. We can't do any magic like that if we accept arbitrary text. And indeed, just by accepting arbitrary text, we can't accept some forms of certificate like dir. We can only accept base64 encoded ones and then just output the base64, which isn't useful to programs that are trying to read a dir certificate. So I like the idea of Trust being able to do arbitrary public keys and all kinds of things like that. I do like that idea. I also would really like the different CRDs for different types of Trust bundle, because I think that allows us to specialize more in each one. And specifically with a X509 certificate Trust bundle, excuse the dog, sorry. with an X509 certificate trust bundle, I can think of smart things that we can do with it. Yes, that's what I mean, Jake. Yeah. Like, we would probably assume that most inputs would be PEM, but we would allow, say, for a config map, the key might be a base64 encoded dir certificate, and we will read that, decode the base64, parse the dir certificate to confirm it's valid, and then likely store that as PEM in the intermediate representation, so we can output it into any format.
Sounds good to me. We should just, yeah, we should restrict the scope for the time being to just handling X509 certificates. But I do yeah, we should accept any input format and output the desired input format. That sounds like it has use cases.
Like, does reducing the scope of it so that it is concerned just by trust distribution and is not just a generic sinker, it does not necessarily mean it's not the same as restricting input to X509, because trust distribution could also mean different things, right? So there would anyway be a need to parse not X509 data, if that makes sense. And would anyway there would anyway be a need to specify what format it is and like what kind of converter can possibly be applied to this in future if we wanted to distribute different types of trust, no? Like the HTTP source, the source that Jake added. That, I mean, logically that anyway fits into trust distribution. It just doesn't fit the format.
Yeah. So I think what Ash is saying is that we should rename the current format to like an X509 trust bundle, and we should, in future, be able to distribute all kinds of things like GPG keys or WireGuard keys, or just like raw Edwards curve. But we should start by doing it right for X509.
Yeah, specifically X509 X509 is our core competency, and literally to a rounding error, everything has this problem. Everything has the problem of X509 trust stores, whether or not they know it. Everything has the issue where they're just baking it into their base image and then sort of YOLOing it from there. We can do the most good there. Like, not many people comparatively have the problem of dealing with trust for checking package signatures, for example. That's a problem we can also help with, but like the scope of the number of people affected by that is minuscule compared to TLS trust.
I think I'm convinced. Perhaps an implementation detail, or something that should be discussed elsewhere, is a question of whether we rename. So I think from my perspective, I'm quite clear that in the kind of resource names, we shouldn't have the word trust. I think otherwise we're stuttering, assuming we don't rename the project altogether. Or I still think that's true, actually. We shouldn't have trust in the resource names. But our question is, do we rename the current resource to be X509 bundle or bundle X509, or do we create a new resource with the idea that for users who intend to distribute trust for a format that we don't necessarily natively support yet, they could still use a Unix cat equivalent, if that makes sense. So rather than replace the one we have, add a new resource which is X509 opinionated.
I think my instinct would be to have like a TLS bundle or something, yeah, and maybe have that be explicit in the name. I probably wouldn't keep the cat thing around just to avoid any possible confusion. Like the generic thing, like the cat command on steroids isn't what I'm expecting from the trust thing. I think I'm expecting a deeper integration with whatever sort of bundle is being created. And the sort of cat thing could easily be copy pasted to other types of bundle, but equally, yeah, like I think that's an implementation detail that like can be discussed offline. I'm not sure if that's. I don't think that's going to be particularly controversial or contentious.
But is it like preferable to have a custom resource type per each like input type, as opposed to having to specify what type of input it is on the custom resource and then apply the converter, whichever is matching converter, if needed?
I think so. I think that definitely makes sense. I think we should have an X509 specific resource. So you can't mix and match between whatever random thing we want to support in the future.
Yeah, it's
WireGuard keys or what have you. Like, yeah, like I think it makes sense in a single resource to me. So I might have a PEM encoded thing with a bunch of comments, from this config map, and then dir from the secret, what have you, and then put it into a PKCS 12 bundle. Like that's definitely makes sense. And it also makes sense that I need to use a separate resource for a whole nother domain of stuff.
Like we can't meaningfully have, as Josh alluded to there, we can't like mix a WireGuard key and a TLS route and create a meaningful output from those two things. So we'd end up having to enforce anyway that all inputs are of the same type if it was a generic CRD. And like this, just by having a specific CRD, we just remove the need for people to specify type TLS, type WireGuard, whatever on the different inputs. I see Jake unmuted.
No, I was just like, sounds good. So what should we do? Should we write this down into a design doc?
Yeah, if there's consensus on specifically focusing on TLS trust bundles to start with, I don't know if we even need to go to the depths of a design doc for it. Like I'm not sure that that's going to be contentious or need much more discussion than that.
I think it would be good to have it in a design document, because we can then, it's all super clear about the API. And I agree with you, it won't be contentious, but then we explicitly have it written down somewhere. We can make sure that there's no gotchas if we kind of or take a look at it. And the second reason is we already have a design document for the bundle CRD merged in the project, so it makes sense to at least label that this is old. It'd be nice if we didn't replace it entirely, just for what's the word?
Backwards compatibility?
Not backwards compatibility. Preservation of archive.
Oh yeah. Like you mean don't replace the design document we already have?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Absolutely. Then
prosperity is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I'd gladly write that document. I've been writing another one today, and yeah, I can take that as an action unless you have some particular desire to do it. Like, happy to do that.
Happy to write it together or review it. I don't mind.
Sound. I'll take an action away to create an issue to track this, and then we can create a design document based on that. So I will write that down. If we've exhausted that particular trust design discussion, I have another one that is the next item on the agenda, which I wrote this earlier today. Is this document, and this is reasonably lengthy and like there's some detail here. But essentially what this goes into is Jake's really interesting PRs that he wrote, which is this one, and then there's another one which I didn't have an immediate link to, which this one, which that's the one. Thank you, Jake. These both propose a method of adding publicly trusted certificate bundles to the trust project and making that easier to consume. And I've sort of, in this document, I've justified why we would want to do that. And I don't think at this point that that's particularly controversial. Like it's a horrible user experience to not have this, and it will make the project a lot better. The question is how we go about doing it. So the first PR, number 36, which is linked there, that embeds a trust bundle into Trust itself. So Trust has a bundle which it will use, which you can choose to put into your bundles. And that's hard coded into Trust. So to update that, you update Trust, the program itself. The second one adds an HTTPS fetcher thing, which will automatically update the thing, the Trust bundle, from some online source that you've configured, and keep it up to date for you. And
Right. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, sure. This one. So yeah, I tried to, like I said, I've summarized why we would want to do this here. I've added some goals. What I've worked out, I think, in my head, is that what I think we should do is create a separate like Helm chart, essentially, which will include a Trust bundle in that and allow that to be updated independently of the Trust project entirely. Very much a dark mode enjoyer, yeah. And also to to sort of develop it off in that angle. So we would essentially become maintainers of a Trust bundle, which would be like the trust bundle. Like we need a different name for the project for this reason. But we would maintain a Trust bundle and be in charge of updating that in the absence of any other obvious way to do that. There may be some project that's already doing that we could use, but I think the advantage of having it in a separate like Helm chart or separate method of deployment is that it can then be updated independently. So my expectation is that Trust will end up in a place like where cert-manager is currently, where we only maintain like the latest version or the latest 2 versions or whatever, because it's not reasonable to maintain every version that we've ever released. The problem is if we embed the Trust bundle, it becomes this huge, gigantic security requirement that we always update the Trust bundle in every version that was ever released. Because people need to update to the latest one almost as soon as it comes out. Like that's pretty core to as a security requirement, and most people are going to be happy to do that in every case, every time. So this makes it very easy for them to update their having it in a separate deployment sort of target makes it very easy to update that and not update Trust. So if there is some breaking change or action they need to do when updating Trust, they can do that separately to updating the certificate bundle, and they don't need to worry about that. Like they don't need to worry about something breaking in Trust when they update their bundle. They can just do the bundle and they know that that will be fine. The flip side to that as well is the other bundle target doesn't need to be the only thing that ever exists. Like we could create a third deployment that will automatically update for people who choose to have that, and in some ways take on that risk, because it is a risk for them to automatically update their Trust store based on a file they've downloaded from the internet. By having it separated out, they can evolve independently of the Trust project, and people can pick and choose what they want without us having to have all of that in the core project, and with hopefully reducing the risk of confusion there. I think I convinced myself that this would be a better way to go, but I'm open to discussion on this. Like I just thought I've written this down and I'm happy to discuss it, is what I'm saying.
I think from my side, I really like CA bundles being part of the binary, because it's immutable in a way. Like you can't change it. It's not configurable from any API or anything like that. It's this kind of most immutable thing in Cube or anything, like the version of the binary that has a specific hash, etc. And I really like the the security attribute of that. I also kind of understand the versioning problem we would have and the kind of mixture between the kind of trust as a project itself plus this kind of dependency we have, which kind of muddles the two things together. Maybe this is a bit kind of mad scientist. And the other thing is I don't know, having it in a text file and stuff like that. I'm a super big fan of that. One option would be that we run a sidecar to trust, which talks over a socket, and that be where these kind of hard-coded trust bundles come from. That would solve the first problem with versioning, and that this sidecar container can have a different version, and is completely separated from the trust project itself. And number two, you still get the property of it being part of an actual binary. Maybe that's a bit too mad scientist. Yeah, it's over kind of a local socket, so it's you still kind of have high security in the kind of cube world. I don't know. What do you think of that? Maybe that's a bit too mad scientist, but
I think so. I hadn't considered a sidecar in that way. As a sort of user story type thing, I imagine a platform engineer thinking about this in terms of like, I'll start that again. If I'm a platform engineer, I'm installing a Helm chart to install trust. And if there's a sidecar in that Helm chart, if there's a sidecar that's controlling what trust bundle is being used, that would still be installed as part of the same Helm chart, would it not?
yes. However, perhaps this is unfounded, but I feel like a Helm chart is more fallible than a real container and a binary inside of it. Yeah, perhaps that's completely unfounded. Yeah, it's like when a Helm chart as well is also configurable. Like it has an input and it changes the state of the output manifests. So you don't have the same kind of hash. I don't know. Maybe I'm going down a different rabbit hole in my head and not explaining it very well.
I think Jake's just posted essentially a suggestion that the image of the trust bundle is configurable, like the container image itself. So
exactly. Yeah.
That
I've only thought about it for 2 minutes, but it does sound like a good idea to have an embedded trust bundle in a signed binary that is independent of trust, as long as we make the API simple enough that we don't want to change it every release.
Correct, and I think I think it would just be a case of it's just an IO copy, and once you get an EOF, like that is what that bundle is, and so it's very replaceable, and the API is minimal. Yeah, that could be quite nice.
Yeah, need to think some more, but it sounds all right on the having heard it for 2 minutes.
Yeah, the only other issue is the trusting that Unix socket, how we do that, or if we do that at all. If someone was able to hijack the Unix socket, could they forge something or whatever? But perhaps we can. The cert-manager could even sign it or something. I don't know.
So I get that. I understand. I think what you're proposing, and I think it's a valid solution to the problem, and is a different solution to the problem as well. I think I prefer the interface in this proposal where it can essentially just be like you're installing this separate home chart, which just is another config map, and you can just use it sort of as is, or we can have a public key thing that will a publicly trusted new source, which will go and fetch this predefined config map with some data in it, metadata about it. Like I kind of like that fits in like that. but yeah, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and the other kind of counterpart to that is that the config map or like data blob that it turns into isn't versioned in any primitive way. Whereas like a image is, like in Kubernetes, I can do a kubectl get pod and I can see that the actual container itself is clearly versioned, whereas config map isn't. Is another yeah.
Well, Mael insisted that he didn't want to host, but is doing an excellent job of hosting in the backseat. So I will move on from this topic because I think there has been enough discussion. I think certainly my main idea was to just propose this and then we can go forward because we're definitely going to need to come up with something on this. Mael conveniently is also the next one on the list, so he can take it away.
Thanks. Okay, so the next item is something I added right before the meeting or during the meeting. I want to give an update on the design for this projected token proposal that I have not put as a proper design document on the cert-manager repository. I will. I'm a bit late with this. So two things for this. I'll give a bit of context for anyone who didn't follow this. We discovered that in 1.24, in Kubernetes 1.24, by default, the Kubernetes cluster won't create what is called default service account token secrets. The problem with these secrets with these tokens is that they are static, meaning that they don't have an expiry. They don't have any information about who is using it. And that's something that has come up, for example, with the discussion with Morgan Stanley, with Neil, who is on the call. Neil has been doing some research. So last time I presented two solutions, solution 1 and solution 3. Solution 1, it was about using the token request API. Cert-manager would be able to request a token on behalf of the person using Vault, the Vault issuer. And I think there is a soft consensus on the idea of using this solution. And on the other side, we had Neil testing the solution 3, which we didn't know. We weren't sure whether this solution, which is based on using this volume, sorry, I'll open the document so that you can, I forgot to show the, okay, so sorry. Yes, so I was talking about solution 1, and I said it's about the token request API, and it is the preferred solution. And then I said that last week, Neil has done some research and found that the solution 3 is also possible. He found that the audience, we thought the audience had to be equal to, I can't remember the audience. It's
Kubernetes service or something like that.
Yeah, it's a specific one. Yeah, Kubernetes local cluster .svc. Well, I don't remember. But the point is, it is configurable, which means it is possible to use a projected volume token. And solution 3 is still on the table.
Yeah, I think Joshua pointed out that there's an audience parameter, and when you create a Vault role, you can specify an audience there. So if you set that to Vault token, this will work.
When you say role, do you mean the Vault inside Vault?
Yeah, the Vault Kubernetes authentication role.
Okay, yeah. So for example, here this command Vault write is configuring the audience with Vault. So is it what you mean?
Sorry, struggling to see it.
Sorry, put it bigger. Can you see?
No, sorry, it's my fault. I'm on an iPad. So.
Trying to make it very, very big.
Yeah. So when you register a cluster with Vault, you create a Kubernetes authentication endpoint. You configure for the entire cluster, and then you create various authentication roles, and that's what you log in. So it's the where the issuer logs in. There's a endpoint, and it logs into plus a role is provided as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. There are two questions that are still hanging in this design. The one is, do we still want to pursue the solution 3? And is there a benefit in trying to pursue this? We know that it's painful for the solution 1 is painful because we need to rotate, but this is an implementation problem, it's not really a problem. So Neil, would you be able to, do you have a preference? I would like to know if solution 3 is important for you.
Solution 3 would solve the issues we're facing, so that's primarily, but the authentication cross is as you say static, so there's no audience and it's not expiring. So if that's available, the projected volume tokens, we would be able to set that up and make that work. We're also going to have a look at JOT authentication as an alternative. But yeah.
Oh, I forgot. I completely forgot to put this solution. So it's a very different way of handling this, which is and it's a good way because you don't need to. Vault doesn't need to access to the API server. In some cases, it might be useful.
Could you talk a bit more about this rotation problem about solution 1?
Yeah, it's just if cert-manager has to request a token with the token request API, it will need to track, to renew after the expiry time or before.
Yeah, so I can talk from experience of other projects like Istio, and I believe the other kind of service meshes are doing similar things. It's totally valid to request a token during every call to Vault. So you would do a token request on the minimum expiry time, and do that every time you make a call to Vault.
Oh, okay.
So it would completely remove the kind of needing to kind of write all the machinery around the kind of rotation stuff. And assuming Istio works, we can hopefully assume that the kind of the load, let's say on the API server, is like minimal, which it pretty much is anyway. Just another kind of round trip, as it were.
Okay, but perfect. It makes this solution even better. Just to give some context, Neil, the solution 1 would still. I'll show you a token created by. Okay, never mind. It doesn't show, but it's the same projected token that you would get with the projected volume token. It's the same thing. It would contain the same. The same expiry, and it would solve the same problem, except it would fit with the Kubernetes way of doing.
Yeah, I don't think from our side we're really too worried. As long as I can take a story to our audit team that the tokens are no longer static, I think we're good. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think there's quite a nice security story there too. So on the so let's say multi-tenanted or multi-issuer, whatever you want to call it, cluster, on your issuer configuration, you say, this issuer has this audience, this issuer has this audience, blah, 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 blah. And then on the Vault side, when you configure this, you can set multiple of those, I forget what they're called, you just mentioned it, but those the Kubernetes authentication path or API endpoints or what have you. And then it's quite nice because cert-manager can then basically authenticate to those different endpoints based with different audiences, which means that you, from an audit perspective, you have like separation, right? Using the kind of different audiences you choose.
Yeah, no, this all sounds very good to us.
Oh, that's great. So I think there is not like except for the new comment that Josh said about the fact that it's not that bad to create a token every time we do a request. That's great because it will simplify at least the first draft. I think we can go with solution 1, and I still don't know when this will be worked on. Unfortunately, there is a PR open by me that I created a while ago. It has almost nothing in it. I don't remember which solution I had taken on this. Yeah, I think I took the solution 1 approach. So anyways, that was the update for this design. I'll come back to the agenda and I'll talk a bit more, if that's okay. There has been progress on the Google Season of Docs front. Richard, would you prefer, is Richard here?
He is not anymore.
Okay. Okay. So I'll give the update. That's fine. Season of Docs is something we have started 2 months ago. We hired someone paid by Google. She's called Mihak, and she has done work. So Richard, me, and Mihak have been working. Richard, so the first results of actual tangible, I guess, results are the getting started guide that has been merged. I think it's a great getting started guide because finally we have something end to end. We're not showing self-signed certificates to people. We're showing the whole flow, including domain names and Let's Encrypt. And that was a very big, important milestone, I think, in getting a better documentation for new users. So if you can, you can take a look. I think it's a great guide. And Richard also has been trying to get more data on how we're doing with Google search. When people do Google searches with, for example, Let's Encrypt Kubernetes, when they type Let's Encrypt Kubernetes, what they find. And we're using something called SERP Watcher, and we're trying to change this. We're trying to influence how deep in the Google search we're trying to bubble up cert-manager.io in searches for keywords like Let's Encrypt Kubernetes. And this is through, for example, his guide. We still have some problems with this. Apparently, Richard mentioned that some of the pages are not showing. Finally, I want to show some results from the survey that Mihak has been running. The survey, we gathered 43 responses. Can you see something?
You're not presenting if that's what you're expecting.
Oh, wait, I've never been presenting the whole time.
No, I presented.
And no one has, I feel stupid. The whole way I was showing stuff. Oh, I have 1 minute to represent the whole thing. Yeah, I'll just show now. Yeah, so some most people are using Helm, no surprise. And the rest is using kubectl apply. I guess, yeah, there's no surprise with this. Can you see my screen?
We can now, yeah.
Great. And we have we got some feedback, unexpectedly feedback about cert-manager itself, not the documentation. And I can't go over everything, but I will stop. Or I will show some interesting results. For example, the upgrading and installation sections on the documentation website are clearly very useful to people. And for example, someone says, I always follow the steps in the upgrading guide. It seems clear from the results that we're doing a good job at the upgrade notes. So that's a positive thing. And yeah, there's some other feedback. Yeah, I can't go over every piece of feedback. I will try to distill some of the rest later, because I don't have time now. We're over time.
Yeah, do you
So
have a
I
link to
will.
the results that we?
How does it work? Can I share this link? I'm not sure. Question. Can you see something when I share this? The problem is there are some emails.
I see the questionnaire itself. So what I'd say is, since we're at time, we'll try and get a link together and put it in the meeting notes for anyone who wants to refer to it later.
Thanks.
I'll add that as an action item for my own. Yeah, unless anyone has anything particularly pressing, we're at time and I'm hungry, so I will call an end. Thank you to anyone that chose to watch. Thank you for everyone that came along today. I will stop the recording now. Thank you, everyone.